Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of When Life Happens. My name is Simone Boersma. I'm your host and owner of Kinderhuis Gouda. Today, I will speak with Stephanie Beijnes. What happens if all of a sudden you've got to deal with grief at the working place? What is your role as a manager? What is your role as an employee? And how well can we help each other within this process? I talked with her about all of these matters. I hope it's inspiring for you as it was for me. Thank you, Stephanie, for your contribution. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you very much for participating. You're a speaker in loss and grief, also a teacher.
Yeah.
And we are going to talk today about grief on the workplace. And my first question for you, because you're an expert in the field, but every expert has his own past, why he does what he does. What colored your choice to be an expert on the field in grief?
Well, to literally send a picture, this is my mom.
Oh, beautiful.
See her. This is how she was when she was young. This is in the last year. She died when she was 55 and I was 16 at that moment. And here you see her with me and my sister. So that colored my grief. Well, actually, the response to that colored my grief. So as you see it there, I grew up in like a really happy family and I loved my mother. And when she died, my response to what happened in my family was sort of like this. So you had my father and my mother and me and my sister, and I was the eldest one. And then my mother died. My father, he sort of collapsed out of her dying. And what out of that happened is that I stepped forward in that. And I'm now 51 and still I can sometimes catch myself still doing that, still going for where the things fall down and solving them and working very hard.
So you really actually what happened to you was the role within the family setting changed for you. If you look at a family setting, which you do in some therapies, you would say that your role within the family changed from one day to the other.
Totally. Yeah. From being the one who was taken care for, as being the one who had to be growing up, like in a few months, taking things over, being responsible. And it was about my 30th. With personal development, I got to see that because until my 30th, that was the water I was swimming in. It was not happened by choice. It was just like, yes, that's what you do.
And so how did you saw that? What did you make it recognize it within yourself?
Well, I took on personal development. So it was in a training where I actually got to see, oh, this is what I'm doing like everywhere. And actually what I just described is sort of the basis, you know, when we go further into organizations or what, it's always with the, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. Not from, hey, that's wrong, but it's just like, oh yeah, that's how I respond to grief. That's how I respond to change. And is that actually working or not? And is there a choice there?
Yeah. And what did it with you at that point that you actually recognized it and saw that with yourself and then thought, okay, I need to change it or find another way of dealing with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was that different for you?
Totally.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like until that moment, you know, from the outside, it looked sort of really nice. You know, I sort of got through life, but the experience was lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Because at the end was responsible. And in that place, you're always lonely. And to be honest, it's not that, it's not like, it's like, okay, it's gone. when you look at me and how I deal with stuff, you can still recognize that. And there is a choice. So that's really the thing. Just to have a look in it and, hey, oh, there I go again. No, I don't need to.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So now we spoke about how you came to the position you are right now, and that it colored your life in a way of grief of losing somebody. But there are many forms of grief, which we also see in each working field, I must say. So could you help me a bit and tell me and the people who are listening which kind of grief you come across in the working area?
Yeah, it's because I just shared about losing my mother. And but then I started to recognize that how I relate to that loss, I relate to all kinds of loss in my life. Doing it, my answer is hard work and filling the gaps. But also after a year, when I was, coaching people dealing with the loss of someone personal, they said to people like, hey, you need to go, you lost your job, you need to go to Stephanie, or hey, in the relationship there's something going on, you need to go to Stephanie. So in a whole natural way, all the other parts of how people can experience loss came into my room, not in this room, but in my working room.
Can you give some examples of that?
Like the loss of your relationship, the loss of work, the loss of your health, the loss of safety when there is violence in the house, the loss of, well, this whole corona gives people an experience of loss of connection, but also having something to say about where things are going. So yeah, there, and the whole thing is what's our response? And as a human being, actually, at first, we're always driven in our survival modus. That's not a choice. That's just like that.
Yeah, exactly. But then there is also a major part in it is at that point as an employee, if we go in that role, then you have your boss. And they need to be prepared to help you within that situation, let alone see what's going on. Because sometimes people really hide their grief and then people don't know it, they don't see it. So what is your advice to them, to managers, to directors?
Yeah. So you point out all a whole world of the manager, which
director,
is director, and you emphasize on this, and then the whole culture around that. So what is the agreement there is between you and your manager? And that's I've been working in so many organizations, so there are so many ways in how that is spayed out or underneath the whole agreement about what's there. So if you work in an organization, so that's there. So the starting point is always in how do people are used to relate to each other, because that's the starting point. So there you want to look. How is that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Then there is, what does the manager do and what does the employee do? Well, they all, it's like, I would like later on to share something about the method I use, is the compass. But one of the things what I always say is, in how you relate to what you do now is always related to your past. So that counts for the employee, and it also is for the manager. So now, to refer to your question, what should I say to the manager? Well, if you want to be of support for your people who have to deal with loss, who have to deal with all kinds of loss, so like they have to deal with the loss of a family member, but look at the people who are in, and especially in this time, I just heard that the lawyers for divorce are really having a lot of work right now. So divorce, work, health, or someone in the family. So you're a caretaker for someone who is healthy. So the whole spectrum of loss. If you want to do something for your employees, you have to understand something about that, how that works, how it works. We sort of are like that driven into
the process, you mean the process of grieving, of death. Do you think it's underestimated by many people what kind of impact that can have on the dynamics within a team?
Totally. It's like there's no clue how big the impact is. And at the same time, that's why I really love my work, because I have been working with teams, I have been working with managers, and access when you really, it's like we have in the Netherlands Cruyff. Well, everyone knows Cruyff.
Everybody knows. People, if you don't know the name, please type it in and you will see it and you will know it.
He has a lot of big sayings, but one of the things is, je gaat het zien wanneer je het door hebt. You're gonna see it when you get it. And that's the whole thing. When you start to see, so your question is, what does management need to do? Well, if you want to understand someone else, start with understanding yourself. So that's always what I do in the training. I start to work with, so how do you deal with loss? And then they say, I have no loss, I'm fine, nothing happens in my life. So, okay, good. Well, let's have a look how fine that all is. And then there's always something, of course, because life is like that.
Yeah, it's not a linear process, right? Life.
No, totally not.
No.
And it's not wrong. So I love Brené Brown. Being vulnerable is being powerful. I love her. She brings a whole new way of having access to being human. And I think that in a lot of organizations, that's the first stepping part. Like, is there an agreement that we play this game, that I'm fine? You know, in the Netherlands, when we ask each other, how are you? You're supposed to say, I'm fine. You're not supposed to say, well, I'm having a bad day, because then it's awkward for the other one. You know, like that.
Do you think it's really a Dutch thing to deny that vulnerability we have?
Well, it's everywhere around the world. I think it's a human thing. The only thing what's really typical Dutch is that I think we are very suppressed in expressing ourselves. So the keeping up appearances, I'm fine, is when you look at other countries or more to the south, in emotions, any emotion, being in love or being happy or being sad, is much more expressed.
Yeah.
And it's not that I am aiming for that we all go like, oh, like sort of drama queens. That's not what I mean. But just to authentically be expressed about what's going on in yourself. That I think there's a lot of work.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Especially when you say, okay, people in the Netherlands or people in common don't actually show their emotions or their vulnerability really fast, really quick, I must say, because they see that as a weakness instead of a strength.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's what I would say too. Yeah.
Yeah, and now we're coming actually to your training, because you developed a training for managers, employees, to find that connection with each other, to bring them to more close to each other, and to persuade that process of healing with each other. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because the thing what I really love is that when it comes to a person, the dynamic is going, what I call going into your old mechanism, and there is a choice and moving forward. when you look at teams and organizations and you get that this is how we humans work, you start to see that in a team, the same thing happens. And if a whole team gets that, then it's unconsciously, but people are also then keeping them together in this behavior, not sharing. You know, it's like it seems like a conspiracy.
They're stuck in like in a similar process, and they don't get out of that nutshell.
Yeah.
And how do you get them out of that nutshell?
Great question. Actually, when I start with a team, I never actually know. I only know that this is the thing which I need to clear out. But how it is in this team, I don't know. I have to find out. I just have to need the courage to be the mirror that they can find out. That's the whole thing. The only thing I do know, it's there, always. Not because it's them, but it's just that's how we humans work. So I would like, if it's okay, if I share something about the method I use.
Of course.
Yeah. So to introduce my method, how I came to it is that the starting point, what was already there written about grief. And at the moment when I started educating myself, there was still this step-by-step process. Some of you know Kübler-Ross as a name. Some of you the Worden tasks, but they all seem to be like a linear process. Like, okay, so at first you're angry, and then you get depressed, and then you can to acceptance like that, and then you do that step by step. But my whole experience was people go everywhere all the time. They move like all steps. So how, and it also, what I also saw is that the idea that you could get to this point, and it is also my personal experience, is that I noticed everyone around me relating to me, when is it finally done with your mother? Like that, you know, why, what, at family meetings, do you really need to talk about this again? You know, like that, like it should be ready, done, dealt with.
Yeah, solved, and we don't speak about it anymore.
Yeah. And I really thought there's something wrong with me.
Why?
And so the combination is, and I had no access in dealing with myself because it couldn't be there. There's something wrong. And so out of that, I really started to look like the combination of my whole own experience. And because I am a teacher, I always love to look at something which works. So while I was working with all these people, I started to work on something else, which was more into like the real experience of dealing with the grief and my real experience with dealing with all these different people. And I've worked with so many different people between 9 and 77 and all in between. Then I got to this thing, and that is that I thought of, it should not be something relating to like you take steps, but it should be something which you could use every time again and again. So what I made is that I start to work with the compass, and there are 2 lines in the compass. So when I'm here, and I'm actually going to stand because then because it's a movement thing. Okay. So the thing is that I stand here in my life, and when I stand like really in the here and now, I stand in my center. That's what we think we are. But actually, most of the time, when you look at the line, there is a line referring to the future, north, and there is a line referring to the past, which is the south. So in this compass where I am right now, there is the line on the north and the south. And that's somewhere in that line I'm actually standing. So I am taking a step to my future, or there is something in my life in the here and right now which I resist. I don't want to have that in my life. And as a response to that, which is not a choice, but it's like the human thing, is then we move back to a past and we move away and we get into either fighting, flighting, or freezing, and we get stuck here. So that's and the whole thing is that with this, people can start to look, because it's when I work with people, we actually walk like where, and you ask yourself, where am I right now? And to have the honesty to see, actually, I am right back when I was 16. I'm doing the whole thing again. Recognizing that is actually the real access to get myself to the center. So this
How do people realize that? How would you say that people within your training realize where they are on that line, on that lifeline?
Well, it's a question being asked, and then people know the answer, because if you start to look at it, you know. And the other part is that people start to look, okay, so where do I find my balance? And this is when we're born, we start to attach, and attachment is the basic thing in how we deal in life. And there are two big steps, is what we get about ourselves. So it's the East, is trusting ourselves. That's one part of the balance. And the other part is the West, and that's the balance of being trusting other people and that you can rely on them. So when we walk in life and something comes at us, it's the question, can I trust myself in this situation and or others? And do I find a balance in that? If I have that, then even whatever comes at me, I still can have the experience that I can move with it and I can move forward. But there are times and there are triggers like that, and then you find yourself, now it's either I cannot deal with it or I cannot trust someone else, and we move away from life and we move back into an old thing. And again, and this movement again and again is not a one-time thing. It's a thing over and over again. And the more the people and the teams I work with start to recognize that, the easier it becomes to deal and find a way. And the questions just point out to where to look at. The answers are so different for every person or every team where it actually is. And the thing is with this is, because you asked, like, how do people know what's necessary when I work with people, that there is a space that everything is okay, because then there is the space to explore this.
Exactly. If you now explain the method you use, you see a lot of types of grieving methods within your method. Yeah. Of course, there must be struggles within the process with each and every person. Which is the most common struggle you see?
Well, when you look at the thing we get ourselves into, it's always an old answer when we were young in how we dealt with things. Mm-hmm. So there is the I'm I don't want to be here, yeah, and checking out, which and there's the fighting and working hard. So if you look to society as a whole, and you look at two of the biggest diseases, depression, stick
their head in the ground. Yeah.
and the other one is burnout. So if you start to understand the underlying way of how do people come to a burnout or depression, and what I notice often is that if you start question it, so it's always start to ask the right questions.
And what are the right questions mostly?
If you want to really work with someone, and I don't know if it needs to be the manager, but the manager does need to recognize that someone is really not having enough for himself or the people around him, that there's someone else needed. So the manager can be like really a trustworthy person to rely on, and it could be someone else who can some extra support, who knows where to look. But it is important that the right questions are being asked, like what happened, and when what was here before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you said it multiple times, okay, you work with teams, so then you have a collective environment at that point. We're speaking then of collective grief in a small group.
Yeah.
Many of your colleagues agreed on the fact that it's important to have collective grief.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that so important?
I think that grief, like one, it's the pain, but it points out to the other side, and that's love, that something is important. So when it's possible in a team to actually share that with each other, it's an outcome that people really connect as human beings together. So I always see when that's possible, and that is possible to share, something really special happens in teams. So that's also why I really love my work, because I get in these teams and I get to know them, like really what's important.
Yeah, I think you also come really close in their private environment. So that must, give a connection as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, that's one part of the picture. If you get together, like this is really so in the here and now. And of course, what is also the beautiful part is that when there is vulnerability and people are in the here and now and really sharing, it's like amazing. So that's one part, but I don't want to make it a fairy tale. The other part is that you really need to deal with each other, that this is happening.
Yeah.
With everyone.
Is there a lack of acceptance, do you think, of people in higher positions, that they also have a past that can hurt?
Yes, of course, there's a lack of acceptance of that, because when you look general, that's not where you were hired for. You're hired for to bring results. You're hired for to get your personal productive. You're not hired for to share that you're vulnerable and that something happens. And at the same time, there's really starting to get a notion that when, as a manager, you start to be being human, and that makes you finally much more productive. When you want to look at from, the economic part of it, if you look at the way, when you look at how much money goes to all the people who got stuck somewhere and it couldn't not be. So everything which cannot be always pops up. So it has its impact. People get depressed, people get burnout, people get stuck and get at home. That costs millions of money. So if you want to look at from an economics perspective, why it's interesting to look at starting to get how your employees actually really work and what they need to actually work great. Are you, because that's a big question often is that they ask, oh, so I need to be the social worker here. I said, no, that's not it. You sometimes really need to see that if someone more support is needed, it's really a good thing that you see that the person gets that. But you're human, and it's not the one or the other. So a lot of managers think when I start to be vulnerable, then I'm done. Then I can't put any thing like, but you also need to bring a result. And that's so not true.
And how do you let them see that that's not true?
Well, by experience. Because the one thing I really like what happens in teams I've worked with is that because at a certain point, people start to see, oh, it's opening up. I feel freer now. Oh, now I have some space. And then a director of a school I worked with, he came to me, he said, yeah, I came into the coffee area and I heard one employee saying to another, oh, I was in my south, but I started to have a conversation and now I can move further. So something which was really hidden and stuck
came to light. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. And that's, I think, a beautiful part of your job as well.
Yeah.
And really rewarding.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
So to close the conversation, what is the most common mistake we as a human being make in our working environment when it comes to grief?
Well, that there comes a notion around it, oh, there's something wrong.
And what can we do about it in prevention mode?
Normalize we're human beings. No every human being has a straight line in his life. Everyone goes through things. And the more that is a normal thing, that's what I try to emphasize. If there is space for just being human and you have a bad day, that doesn't mean, oh, no, I can go home. No, and that's also not how I work with so many people. It's not that they don't want to work. Totally not. Most of the people love to do their work, love to be a contribution, and love to find a way that they can do it. And if a manager is really looking at them and making the connection, you will have employees who are so motivated to come back.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way of closing this conversation, which I want to thank you very much for speaking out about this fragile subject and to share your knowledge. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you for the occasion. I really love doing this.